What is going on, everybody, and welcome to episode number 82 of Bettin N Boozin here on the HHH Racing Podcast. I am your host, Kyle Roscoe, and a very, very fun card we have for you guys tonight as we come up on this Friday as Penn National, their Penn Mile Day. It's a fantastic 6-race sequence with all stakes, 5 listed, and all headlined by the Grade 3 Penn Mile worth $400,000. So this is Penn National's biggest card of the entire year, and they run. There's a few facts that I was sent by a good friend of mine in the podcast, Paul Halloran, on Penn National. So I'll read a few off to you guys, and then we'll get right into the handicapping because it really is. It's a very competitive sequence with some pretty good horses, some returning from Derby Day and others, local connections trying to take home the prize from the invaders. So we will obviously give you all that and all of our opinions through this sequence as we come up to this show. As you see scrolling on the bottom of the screen right now, our next show is tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's Thursday, May 30th, 8 p.m. Eastern for Picks and Ponies, episode number 353 with Howard, Pete, and Paul, covering the all stakes late pick 5 at Churchill Downs on Saturday. That's going to be, it's the Regret, the Blame, all those great races are all being run on Saturday at Churchill. So you're not going to want to miss that show if you're playing this weekend. Also, as you see scrolling right now, please go down below the video player. Please hit the like button, and please, if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button. Only 46% of the people that watch these podcasts every single week are subscribed. And if you're coming back every single week for the podcast anyway, why aren't you subscribed? And all my people that watch this show on X or Twitter, I appreciate you guys watching, but come on over to YouTube, like the video, and give us a subscription as that's our main platform. Because not only does it help us out and it shows us that you guys are liking the content, but also it pushes these videos out into the YouTube algorithm to hopefully bring like-minded horse players like yourself to the HHH Racing Podcast. And for that, we thank you. Real quick, guys, we'll go through. As you all know, we can find every episode, not only every episode of Bettin N Boozin, but every single episode of the HHH Racing Podcast, also in audio form, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. For those, please go rate, review, and subscribe over there as well. The Power Picks, guys, still going super strong. I believe we're at $2.22 ROI all time now. It went up over the past few weeks. I just forgot to update the banner. But $2.20, over 600 picks at this point, over almost 3 years of picking. We're well in the black of the ROI. So, and that's only $4 a weekend. That's $15.99 a month, how Patreon bills it. For only $4 a weekend, you get 2 tracks every single week, price plays, spot plays, pick 5 grids, everything you need to be successful on any given Saturday. The HHH Racing Podcast Power Picks got you covered. One of the most profitable and affordable tip sheets in all of YouTube. And if you want to look at previous editions of those Power Picks before you buy them, or just want to learn more about us, hhhracingpodcast.com is the place to do so. Guys, going to bring on my co-host here for tonight, and then we'll get into some comments, and then we will get right into the show. First, it's the crew again from University of Kentucky, also from West Coast bias himself, Noah Maher, and down south, Mr. South Beach, of course, from Chicago and the Ohio State University, Charlie Freeman. Boys, what's going on tonight?
What's up, fellas?
Hopefully I'll be here the whole show. We're going to see how long this Wi-Fi lasts. Hopefully it goes well.
Well, they said...
Should we set an over-under for that, Kyle? What's the line?
Get a chat pool going.
Well, over-under on the time he lasts in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have faith. Like I said, we did some things on the side. Hopefully it fixes itself. If not,
we made some equipment changes.
Yeah. So, we put the blinkers on for Charlie. Hopefully he can stay on the entire show. But welcome in, everyone. Thanks so much for doing the show. Of course, the regulars always here. Michael Lawson is here. Katie's here. Marco Lou is here. Racing Downwind is here. John Laro is here. Thanks so much, John, for joining the show. I don't think I've seen your name before, but thanks for the kind words, John, and welcome in. Thanks so much for joining the show. And, of course, Terry Frank is here. Only 1% hit the like button. Come on, peeps. Hit the like button. Terry, very astute viewer, my friend. Absolutely hit that like button for us, and I'll continue to remind people throughout the show, of course. But guys, last thing I want to mention here before we move on is that if you haven't picked up your book yet, A Better Way of Thinking, it's a great friend of the podcast, Matt Miller's new book. You can either scan the QR code I'm going to put on the screen now, or you can go to abetterwayofthinking.com. It's a fantastic memoir talking about all things like betting odds related, how you transforming your betting game. So contest play, just normal everyday betting, and just lessons for life in general. It's a fantastic book. I'm getting through it myself right now. I know a lot of people in this chat have already finished it. And if you have, there's only been good words coming out. So abetterwayofthinking.com. Please go pick up Matt's new book. Boys, let's go through here and let's go on to the races, as we have 6 races to cover tonight instead of 5, and it's in the middle. So the fun thing about Penn National, guys, is they're very well known for racing at night, and it kind of parlays in the fact that a lot of these runners and trainers, they run at Laurel Park and all through Maryland, and then they go to Penn National for the night. So it's kind of been a dual factor, and they run all the turf races early in the card because they don't have lights for the turf course, but they have lights for the dirt course. So as you'll see as we go through these races in the sequence, all the turf races will be run first, then the dirt races will be run afterwards. And then I'll read off some cool facts that I can't be remiss. Paul Halloran sent me a full list of stuff and a great story from Penn National. Unfortunately, the story is like 4 pages, so I can't read the story, but this is a bunch of little facts on Penn National before we get right into the show, and I'll make it a little bit bigger so everyone can read at home. Track opened on August 30th, 1972, with an opening day handle of just over $1 million to over 10,000 fans. Turf course didn't open until 1978. The biggest thing for Pennsylvania was this OTB that opened in 1992. And I read in the story that Paul wrote, a lot of the OTBs back then were all bare bones, just straight betting. In Pennsylvania, they wanted to build it up, make it like a, kind of a fine dining establishment with OTBs. So that kind of transformed the whole OTB business as a whole. The 1999, they brought in eBet, which is one of the first ADWs ever created, was launched in 1999. The one thing that also Penn National is known for is they're known for a lot of these big ideas that seem, very mainstream today in horse racing. They've started from Penn National, ADWs being one of those. And then the casino with the racetrack on Hollywood Casino opened in 2008. And the record handle for Penn National was Penn Mile Day last year, which, funny enough, we also covered on this show last year, and that was 4.5 million. And if you remember that day was an absolute bog. It rained, it poured all week before that card, and it still reached record handle status. So hopefully the weather can stay strong for Penn Mile Day, and they should be able to crush that goal again, because this card is honestly, I'm very, very happy how good this card turned out. Lots of big fields, lots of competitive fields. So good on Penn National for bringing this card together. Guys, let's get into race number 3, which is the start of this the 6 races. Also, we're talking about all stakes today, guys. So races 3 through 8 are where all the stakes races lie. That is what we're going to cover. There's all turf pick 4s. There's pick 5s. There's a ton of stuff in there. And we're not covering a specific bet today, but we're going to be going through a ton of just a ton of stakes and a ton of horses throughout this sequence. Race number 3, as I said, kicks off the sequence with the Lifeard Stakes with a field of 10. They're going to mile 16th on the turf for $100,000 for Pennsylvania breds, guys. And as I bring up the picks right now that we'll start with, you'll see Patrick's picks also going along the bottom, guys. However, he was unable to make it tonight due to something with the family, so hopefully everything's okay with Patrick, but you'll see his picks scrolling on the bottom of the screen. You'll see we're going with 3 different horses. Noah agrees with Patrick on top with the number 2, Dream Chaser at 8-1. Charlie's going with the number 5, Princess Javancia for Connor and Merriman at 9-2. I'm going with the number 10 on the short list for Aaron McClellan at 6-1. So looking for prices here, boys. First, on the start. No, I'll let you start as you're the biggest price in the on the entire on top from all of us. What'd you like most about the number 2 Dream Chaser and this being a first time turf effort?
Boy, do I wish Patrick was on the show because I'd like to hear what he says about this 2-horse. I think we're thinking similarly. For me, this was a very difficult race. So ultimately landed with a price. I went with Dream Chaser, the 2. This horse, I don't see a ton of speed in the race, and I think this horse coming out of sprint races will be, if not on the lead, at least very close and forward. Actually, it does have her on the lead, so
there you go.
If she does find herself on the lead, I would prefer that, especially backing her. I find it very interesting that Robert Reed, towards the summer last year, actually wanted to get her on the turf, got rained off both times. And then now second off the layoff since December. Now he chooses the turf in a very ambitious spot, in a state bred race for fillies, going 2 turns on the turf, which is something that she's never done. You get, I believe it's Michelle Sanchez, or is it Michael?
I think it's Michelle, but I think it's a guy. So Michelle Sanchez.
Okay. Yeah. I know that I'm not super familiar with Pennsylvania racing, but I know that these 2 hit at a very good clip. So just kind of going with the angle that there's not a ton of speed in the race, and I think it's very difficult. So at least I'm going to go and try to catch a price here.
And there's your good clip, 82 together, 27% on the win end. So absolutely, Sanchez is Robert Reed's top guy up in the Northeast area. So Dream Chaser, again, like you pointed out, a good thing that I honestly kind of missed was that he tried to get this horse on the turf before and kind of just he kept winning on the dirt. So there's no real reason for Reed to take him off onto the turf again. Then you say second off the layoff here, chooses this spot. It's definitely an ambitious spot and one that might be worth a second look if you're kind of like me and you're looking for prices. This 8-1 shot could be the horse on top, if or at least underneath to be considered for sure. Charlie, I'll go to you next. The number 5, Princess Javancia, Elizabeth Merriman, coming off of Timothy Ham last time, a 51 buyer, but back numbers definitely fits in this race.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I chose to key in on. I know obviously it was a yielding turf, but the one effort that she's had on this course obviously ended up being a winner. And I kind of took as well as the angle kind of that Noah was going with. I think these first 2 races are wide open. So I was looking for, not quite as big of a price, but, a middle in price nonetheless. And I didn't see a whole lot of speed in this race either. And I thought this 5 could potentially just, maybe work out a trip like 3 back. I know obviously in that race the horse missed by half a length, but I just figured there's a very real possibility that she could sit, 2-3 lengths off the lead and get that first jump. And the question will obviously be like, the horse that Noah and Pat have on top, can that horse wire the field? And if not, I just feel like it's kind of tough to have one of those closers roll from that far back in a field where, it isn't the best horses and where, again, there isn't much speed for them to close into. So I just thought this 5 could work out a really nice trip.
Yeah, and like you said, this horse has ran in cold races before, back when she was actually trained by Elizabeth Merriman in that race, being favored down at Laurel Park at a mile. So this horse can definitely sit a nice trip in that regard. I ended up going with the number 10 on the short list in this race. Same type of angle, guys. You're looking for someone. I didn't necessarily like the 2 on the lead. First time turf, a little too many questions for me. So I went with Aaron McClellan. This is a horse off the layoff that ran in the Pebbles last time at the Aqueduct's fall meet. But Aaron McClellan, guys, is very, very good off the layoff. It is a little bit of a smaller sample size. But if you go here, days between starts greater than 180 days, you'll see 9 for 45, so 20% on the win end. So McClellan knows how to train these off of layoffs, and she's very good. She runs a lot in the Northeast. And as you see, 97 times in 2024, 79 of her runners have been at Penn National. So a very, I think this Pebbles shows what Aaron McClellan thinks of this horse. I think she thinks she's very talented. Took her all the way to Aqueduct, where she doesn't ship that often. Only lost by 2 3/4, granted at a very big number. But this race wasn't that bad. These horses came back, didn't come back to win, but came back to flatter that form. All ran low 80s, which would be more than enough, I think, to win this race. So I think as long as on the short list is ready off this layoff, as McClellan, like I said, knows how to train him off, I think the 10 could be very dangerous, and with the trip that she could sit in this race. Guys, let's go on to our underneath horses. Charlie, I'll let you kind of finish up with your thinking. You have the number 8 in a spin, who I have in second, and the 7, Lady Out of the Blue, who none of us have anywhere. So feel free to talk about that one as well. Number 8 in a spin.
Yeah, so these are, the 8 and 7 are 2 Gulfstream horses. So, at least it was horses I have some familiarity with seeing. For in a spin, obviously for me, the big question is going to be, obviously with the slight, decent cutback in distance for a horse, that's going to be a closer. And again, in a race where we've talked about there, isn't much pace. Can she close down in time? But, you look at the race 2 back where she actually won, and she wasn't as far back as normal.
Yep.
She was 3 lengths off the lead instead of, more 5 or 6. And the pace was, a bit of a slower one. So, to account for it, Ruiz had her more forward. So for me, that's what I kind of keyed in on, where I think in a spin could be really interesting, is if he kind of works that trip out again, where he understands he isn't going to get that pace set up, and he needs to be within, 3 lengths or so, maybe sit right behind my 5 that I like. And I think in a spin could be very dangerous. Obviously had ran in that 100,000 handicap against Sandon C, who's a very talented horse. So one of the few horses in here who is probably going from a race of better competition to this, where, you see some of these other ones are going from like these optional claimers and trying to step up to a stakes race. And then Lady Out of the Blue, we talk about this all the time, where it's like the other angle, where we say a race has to be fast and then it ends up slow. Well, you never really know. Again, in a race like this that is so wide open, you could have some of these bombs where they just decide, especially because there's also plenty that haven't run on the turf before, where they just decide to try to show some more speed. So in case there is some sort of meltdown, at least the 7 could clunk up for, some sort of placings. And again, if you look at some of the efforts when this horse is kind of similar to like what I said about the 8, when they do have her a little more forwardly placed, she can perform a little bit better. So I think that's kind of the same key for the 7 and 8, is because they have them close enough to actually be within touching distance. Because obviously, if there's not a lot of pace, they're going to have to make up a lot of ground.
Yeah, and absolutely, and obviously that could be a very big problem coming down the stretch. Noah, you have on the short list, so anything you want to touch on with that horse? And then your third horse is the number 6, Dr. Abby. So anything you want to add on with the 10, and then you can move on to the 6.
No, I agree with you on the 10. I think out of the horses in this race, I think this is the one that could have the biggest improvement. And then it does in fact help that the trainer, has those kind of stats off the long layouts.
Yep.
So definitely want to take a look at. Maybe a little concern. Again, I'm not super familiar with this track. I know it is a smaller turf track. Maybe the 10 post would be a slight concern for me. But for someone that doesn't necessarily play this track, I could be overthinking a little bit. And then into the 6, a little bit of an angle with the 2, not necessarily as much turf reading, at least from what I saw.
Yep.
But another one, I think if you toss the last race, she is going to be coming off a 7-day layoff, but she actually did that 2 and 3 back. She came off a 9-day layoff and actually ran the best race of her career.
Yeah.
So I don't think you have to worry about that too much. Just a little bit of a question in the turf, but if she runs that race 2 back and proves that she can run the turf, I think she's going to be a factor in here.
Best trainer, Bruce Kravitz. No relation, of course, to the boss man, but Bruce Kravitz being the winningest trainer in the history of Penn National, I wouldn't be too worried about what he has coming out. I believe he's at 5,000 wins or something like that at Penn National. He runs like 90% of his horses at Penn National. So if there's anyone that knows how to get it done, if you want to go trainer for a course per se, Bruce Kravitz is definitely the guy to lean on there. The only other horse we didn't, or actually Princess Javancia, we did talk about. There's a bunch of other horses in here, like the one Stern Chaser that might have, a little bit of effect on here. It's a horse coming over from Gulfstream from Matt's. Looks to be caught up a little bit on the inside, but if this horse can sit this type of trip that she sat at Delaware, that one could easily be, one to win this race with those 79s. Gwensa looks a little slow, and I'm not too sure about the turf for her. First time for Tim Woolley. So it does have a turf race, not the best, albeit probably in the best competition she's ever ran against. So do with that what you will. Ain't Danza is another one that has that type of turf, but doesn't really seem, it seems to be her best surface, but she always seems to clunk up and never really get the job done for me. So I'd be willing to put my faith into other closers if you want to go that route. Abby talked 6, 7, the 8, Anoint is the only horse we didn't talk about. Carrie Bryan, a fantastic trainer, both on the flat and on the jumps in the state here. Ran the best race of one of the best races of her life on turf. She's 6 years old now, coming off another layoff here. Bryan has her, I'm sure, ready for this spot. Carrie Bryan's also not the best off the layoff. So again, if I'm thinking about closures in this spot, I might want to look elsewhere in terms of that. But however you guys play the life art, good luck. I'm going 10-8-5. Pat's going 2-10-8. Charlie's going 5-8-7. Noah's going 2-10-6. So Lynn Unger, thanks so much for doing the show, Lynn. Greatly appreciate it. Lynn Unger says you want to stay on inside on Penn turf. Going wider than 3 wide usually gets you beat. For a lot of people that aren't familiar with this track, that's definitely good advice. Lynn, thanks so much for doing the show. And like I said, thanks for commenting that. I greatly appreciate it. That's a good one. Jason Batts, thanks for joining the show. Jason, he says, I think it's supposed to be mid-70s and sunny next several days. No rain. That is a very good sign, Jason. Thanks for the comment. Thanks for joining the show. Greatly appreciate it, guys. Let's go to race number 4, the With Anticipation Stakes, going a mile and a 16th on the turf again. 3 old and up for Pennsylvania breds. Just the male side of basically the same race as the fillies. Draws a field of 11 with the morning line favorite being a very soft 7-2, the number 3 Fletcher for Jaime Torres and John Lawrence. Second choice being the number 4 Crisper for Jorge Ruiz and Tim Woolley. Third choice being the number 1 a Western Yarn for an invading Umberto Rispoli for Arnaud Delacour. 2 of us are going with the number 1 in this race, Noah and I. Charlie going with the number 11, 10-1 for Chris Davis. Pratt comes into Penn National to ride this one for Arlington legend Chris Davis. Charlie, is it just, it's obviously not just the trainer perspective, but that last race at Keeneland that this horse ran in wasn't the best by any means, but you'd have to assume that that's probably better competition than what he's going to face here.
Yeah, I think it's significantly better. And to be honest, when I watched the replay, I didn't think it was honestly that bad of an effort. Gets a jockey upgrade as well. And I think maybe just this horse, for it to be the first time back on turf in a long time and have to be on good turf, I think is also a big ask. As you can see, the horse was, a pretty big price on that day. But I think there are plenty of the horses that beat this one would be heavily favored in the spot. And, you see 7th and you start to get concerned, but it was only by 5 lengths. So the horse was certainly competitive. There's plenty of back numbers to look on. You can see even in the only other, turf efforts had 2 77s, which is a tops buyer for this one. And again, I think Pratt jumping aboard is certainly something to key in on, as well as, the horse is working forwardly. And when I was going through this, sequence, I kind of felt that the first 2 legs, and I don't know if you guys agree or not, but it seemed like the most open and
yes,
where the favorites, quote unquote, would be the most vulnerable. So I kind of thought, why not look for a price here? And I also just think from, an ability perspective that this horse is pretty versatile. I think, he could sit, 3-4 lengths off the lead and stalk. He could also go for more of a pressing role and sit right behind. And I think it's one that, could be getting better. They just brought it, again, first time on the turf, on good turf in that field is a pretty big ask, and ran a decent number. So I think there's a lot of room for this one to step forward, kind of how you and Noah like the 10 in the last race. I think the 11 has arguably as much, if not more, potential than any horse in this field to step forward, and why not look for a bit of a price?
Yeah, and I mean, this horse has only been on turf 3 times, and they're his 3 best efforts, basically. You have a 76 and 77 on the dirt, but realistically, by numbers, these ones in these state-bred allowance races are definitely the best ones. Look, a state-bred Pennsylvania race at Parks to an open company N2X at Keeneland is a pretty big step up for this horse, only losing by 5 1/4 to Evan Harland and Dude in Colorado, 2 very well-meant horses, one for Pletcher, and I can't remember who Evan Harland is trained by. But coming back to this spot with Pennsylvania breds, I think fits really well for John Dutton. I don't think you're getting 10-1 based on just Pratt alone, but definitely one to be for the high singles. Definitely one to keep in mind, as I have this horse in second as well. Noah, going to our top pick, all the way back to the inside, number 1, a Western Yarn, Arnaud Delacour. I'll show some stats on him in a second. I'll pull up the time for him as well. You can see if this one, quote unquote, favors front runners. So even though there's 3 horses stacked across the lead, there's not too many horses that necessarily want the lead. You see you have a 106 and a 104 on both the 6 and the 8. The 11 is a 105, but all denoted as mid-pack horses. So they don't necessarily want to be on the lead. but there's not that much speed in the race, if you will. The one based on time form looks to sit a nice pocket trip, Noah, and kind of, going back to these races last summer at Parks.
Yeah, if what Lynn Unger says in the chat, I think Rispoli is going to be licking his chops due to the fact that he's going to save ground, the whole way. You mentioned it with Delacour, a guy that's phenomenal off of layoffs, and it's very interesting that he takes his horse off such a long layoff and throws in a pretty, not a impossible spot, but a tough spot, I'd say, in this PA bred stakes race.
How does 22 for 81 sound? No, how does 27%?
That's pretty damn good. That's a number that I would back in a race like this. I don't know entirely what you thought, Kyle. I actually thought on paper there'd be a little more speed, but I guess the fact that there's not a ton of speed does help him a little bit. Mm-hmm. And you might not be thrilled to hear this statement, but I do think this one might go off as the favorite.
Look, dude, with the way it goes, usually you pick second, third choices, and they go off as the favorite anyway. It's about on par.
It's destined to happen to you.
I will say one thing. I could see two things happening in this race. I could see this horse breaking the 6th and the 8th to his outside, breaking just as well and going to the front. I could also see Rispoli being aggressive with this horse. This horse has been run on the lead before, has run very well in the lead before, down at Tampa last year. I think there's if Umberto sees there's no speed going in this race, I could see him sending and trying to take him the whole way. And I don't think that's even a bad thing in this race at all by any means. I just like that Umberto has the choice on what he wants to do. He can either go for the lead if he sees no one or sit back. And I think it still gives a Western Yarn the same amount of win probability either way, whether rating or going to the front. So Western Yarn is going to be my top pick as well as Noah's. Charlie, you have this horse in second. Anything you want to touch on then real quick? You can go to number 4, Crisper, who was the second choice on the morning line.
Yeah, no, I really do like this one. I was very torn. I was going to put this one on top. The main two reasons I didn't was, number one is, as good as the trainer has been off the layoff, it still is the layoff. So we have to see how the horse would perform. And number two, like I said, in a race where I think the favorites are vulnerable, I just wanted to look for a little bit more of a price put on top. But this horse hasn't stepped a foot wrong. Actually beat my top pick, the 11, in that Parks race 2 back. And yeah, has run consistent efforts. I mean, you look at, the turf effort at Tampa a little while back and the Columbia, and that certainly fits in this spot. I really think kind of, a high 70, low 80 is what it's going to take to win in this spot. And you're seeing this one consistently is putting up those kind of efforts. And again, as you guys touched on it, this horse is as ready as the trainer has been able to pull off in the past off these kind of layoffs. I think this one could save all the ground. Again, we don't know as much about Penn National's other tracks we've covered, but people in the chat have been, nice enough to give us that info about how much of a benefit it is to be on the inside, which this horse will have. And, again, with the way the pace is set up, this one could easily send without maybe having to work too hard, or could easily just save the ground and be in that second flight. So I think this one is very dangerous. And then going into the 4, look, the numbers certainly fit. I mean, that 85 on the turf is better than anyone here. My main concern with this one, and I'm guessing, Noah, you can touch on as well, this is why I kind of like this one in third, is this one just seems like one that's going to need to clunk up and just won't get there in time. Because if you look, all those best efforts you see red numbers for hot paces, and I just don't see a hot pace here. So I'm curious to know if you have the same angle as me, but my angle was kind of, I just think this one could clunk up for third and will be flying late, but just won't get there in time.
Yeah, I thought the exact same thing in my notes. I put trip dependent. I just have him in third just because off of that last effort. I mean, if he runs at 85, that's very competitive in a spot like this. But you make a good point. I mean, if the time form pace is accurate, Jorge Ruiz is going to have a lot of work to do. So he might try and get this one involved a little more early than usual.
Then I think, obviously, like we talked about earlier, that probably would be to Crisper's benefit. Jorge Ruiz joining Penn National Jockey Room for one day coming after these titles. He's a mess as a horse I have in third, guys, and Terry Frank likes a lot in the chat. He put the number 9 there as well. I just think this horse has no business being that far back last time. Was wide as wide can be. Never had chance in that race at all. And losing to horses that are going to come back a horse that's going to come back later, stat in the Penn Mile, I believe. So, losing to good horses, I think this horse does his best running towards the lead, which is another thing I'm willing to take off of this race. You see these poly races at Presque Isle, horses in the Presque Isle Mile as well. Losing, being just off the pace and losing by a half, losing by 1 1/4 to Nice Ace, who's a pretty decent poly horse, Pennsylvania bred. There's a lot of things to like on this horse, and I don't have any issue with the turf. I think those numbers, even though finishing well behind, I think the numbers back up that this horse can run on both poly and turf. Teresa Connolly still looking only one for 20 this year, but Connor comes in again trying to take these titles away from these local jocks. That's probably really mean. I put that a really mean way, but trying to catch his piece of the money. And I think this one has a chance to at least be in the money, given that he should be a lot closer. I'm going 111.9. Charlie's going 111.4. Noah's going 184. The only other horse that I want to talk about, guys, before we move on, is the number 3 Fletcher. And this is a horse that Patrick has on top in this race for James Lawrence. Not Jaime Torres, is it? Who? Because I'm saying Jaime Torres like the jockey in New York. I got to look up who this is, to be honest with you. But this is a horse that Pat has on top. This is one that I didn't necessarily like on top because of how far back. Like, he almost seems like he can't really get his footing in these turf races. He's always farther back in the turf races than he is on the dirt races, except that last time, I guess, at Laurel, but lost by 10.5, was, just basically got a nice tracking trip and just completely faded. So I don't know if this horse is just better on dirt or what it is, but did run very well last time, albeit into a cold pace. So is going to have to get the right trip set up to be able to win this race. Hopefully Pat comes on in a little while. He said he might be on later to kind of talk through his early picks that he missed, but this one could be interesting, at least for an underneath, if not, if you like Pat, for the win. I'm going, like I said, I'm going 111.9. Pat's going 318. Charlie's going 111.4, and Noah's going 184. Guys, let's move on to race number 5, and this is the co-feature on the card. This is for the girls, the Penn Oaks, going 1 mile on the turf for fillies 3 years old, of course. Field of 12, so a full field in this race, headed by another pretty lukewarm favorite, the number 10 Pounce, even though I'm not sure she'll be that. Castellano comes in for Mark Cassidy. Second choice, the number 6 Neon Beach. Christian Torres also coming in for Steve Asmussen. And the number 3 Poolside with Slim. Frankie Dettori coming in for Rusty Arnold at 6-1. Guys, switching over to the picks right now. And all of us on here are agreeing with the morning line favorite. Patrick is going a different way with the number 7 Crown Imperial, who we can touch on a little later. Charlie, I'll let you talk first here. The number 10 Pounce ran pretty poorly last time. Like, we're not going to sugarcoat it around here. Ran pretty poorly last time, albeit I think they're trying to figure her out, and that was a very, very tough spot at Keeneland in the Appalachian, losing to horses like Buku. So I'm sure you're like all of us, expecting a little bit of a bounce back here for Pounce.
Yeah, I'm happy to toss that effort. I just think when I watched that race back, she just did not like the good turf at all. And, we talked about this at Keeneland. We talked about it from Derby weekend. The reality is when you have those turf conditions like that, there's some horses that, are kind of built for it, like they're fine no matter what surfaces, or maybe even sometimes you end up discovering they love it. And there's others where you can just tell right away it is not for them. And, the break wasn't ideal. The trip was kind of just a disaster from the start, but that was the main thing I keyed in. And I just did not see that same late kicking ability from Pounce that we've seen before. And look, this is a horse I've kind of keyed in on for a while. I thought the effort in February was decent. So that was a horse I thought was extremely live. 2 back upsetting Life's and Audible and Ozara. The horse was, I think, 20-1 that day and got that all the way down to 9-1. So clearly the public saw the same way. We saw a really cool, versatile side to her as well, where, 3 back in that impressive effort, she wired the field at a hot pace. And the next thing you know, she doesn't break so well and then has to try to close down on the whole field and gets it done against horses that would obviously be the favorites in this field as well. I don't think you're getting 7-2, as you said. I think you're probably getting 2-1, 5-2 maybe. I think Pounce is probably the most likely winner in this entire sequence that we're covering. I just think no one in this field has run against the same level horses. I think as long as the weather holds up, which again, the people in our chat have been nice enough to let us know as of now it should. I just think she's extremely talented, and getting back on firm turf will be crucial. And I like how versatile she is.
No, I'll go to you next, as this is a horse owned by Resolute. So, this is obviously a home horse for you. Anything more that Charlie didn't mention you'd like on the number 10 pounds?
No, Charlie said most of it. We're all aware that she scratched out of that spot on Derby weekend, and then they actually had her entered in a stakes race at Horseshoe Indy, which is a day where they had a lot of weather, so they actually canceled that card. So she's just kind of been itching to get out on the track.
There is the boss as well.
Yeah, I actually am a little slightly worried that because of those two scratches, it's kind of screwed up her work tab a little bit.
Yeah.
But if she runs to what she's capable of, there's plenty of pace to set it up in here. And I agree with Charlie. I had it in my notes. I think she's probably the most likely winner in the card. And I wouldn't be surprised if she's 2-1 or maybe even lower.
I wouldn't be shocked if she went off at 2-1 or something like that. I mean, that 90 in the Here Comes the Bride was definitely the biggest number in the field, at least. And if she gets somewhere like a stalking trip has a target, I think she's going to have a ton of work to be done. As I'll bring up the time form, guys, I'll let you talk about your underneath horses in here. Charlie, you have the number 3 in here being poolside with Slim, a horse that's going to be on the pace. And as you see the time form here, it looks to be a hot pace between the 3 and the 9, pretty contested up front. Do you think she's going to outlast the type of speed that goes on up front? Or what do you think the trip kind of entails for the number 3 poolside with Slim?
Yeah, this is one that's just always really impressed me. It's one I've wanted to try to play in some way, shape, or form, but just repeatedly, finally, I guess the odds makers learned their lesson, because this horse, I swear, I think 2 back end last time out in both those races was somewhere in the 15 to like 20-1 range. And in both those races got bet down to, 6-1, and then made the horse unbettable for me, unfortunately. But the thing I kind of like is, you look, obviously 3 back, that horse romped in a maiden race. The pace was very slow, so it worked out nicely. But then I thought, running against some very nice horses, I love the horse that won 2 back. I just can't pronounce the name, but running against that one, Dancing and Dixie, Style Points, all some horses that have come back to run well. And in that race, trying to stretch all the way out to a mile and a 16th on the turf, hot pace at Gulfstream, and stayed up the entire time. And yes, eventually got caught, but did not fade badly at all. And then again, we touched on, I just, again, didn't think the horse loved that good turf at Keeneland. And it was just tough to try to set that pace, and ran against some very strong heavy hitters in that one as well. So for me, again, as someone who tends to prefer closers over speed horses, especially at distance, I just don't really think that poolside with Slim, is one of those that actually quits it all. So I think that she could absolutely hold up, and, could she wire them? I don't think it's impossible. I just think there's enough pace that maybe she can't quite hold them off, but I think she at the very least can hold on for a top 3 finish. And I think getting to Tori aboard is also a very nice jockey to get. And I think this one could be, pretty dangerous and a nice one to try to mix in underneath.
Yeah, and obviously this horse is, as the boss said, that she's cross-entered in a stake on Saturday at Churchill for June 1st, race number 9. That, of course, that will be covered here on the podcast tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. So we'll see where she goes, but I agree with you, Charlie. I think she's got a chance to hold on. I like her more than the 9. Pink polka dots for Joe Sharp. So if there's one speed horse that's going to stay late, I think it's definitely going to be the 10. Noah, my friend, I like your thinking here. Number 4, Nicest Pie. This is Kelsey Danner, Beshizzle with Dee Dee McGahee, who's a fantastic. She's fantastic. This is a horse that was running lights out at Turfway. I don't know. She was time zones back in the Mamzelle at Churchill, and now stretching out a little bit, but Kelsey's been very happy with the way she's been working.
Yeah, I agree with you. Besija had he had her way too far back last time. I thought it was a pretty decent field in that listed stake race at Churchill. She was going into the race really nicely. She came out of the race, just as good. So I'm not too worried about that. This is one where, Kelsey can't necessarily run this horse at Turfway all year long. So she's got to try and improve on the turf. And I like the way, with the pace set up, she naturally likes to come from the back of the pack. It's just the question of whether she can handle that 2-turn distance.
Yeah, and for me, the way she runs, it doesn't seem like an issue at all. I know Kelsey likes to get aggressive, but she doesn't like to get aggressive without reason. I think 5.5 is a little too short for her. She ran 6.5 at Turfway. Granted, again, 1 turn, but she ran 6.5 and did it very, very well. Ended up beating Poolside with Slim to actually break her maiden as well. So that could be something to take away. And I mean, when I talk about this horse has been blitzing up the track at Turfway. And last time I liked her on top actually, but I was a little dubious. You know, maybe she's she's the top poly horse. She doesn't necessarily want the turf. I think those concerns were kind of nulled when she came sprinting late and just only lost by 2 3/4. So I think Nicest Pie could definitely be one to keep in mind here, and would definitely be my backup horse if Pounce doesn't end up coming through for me on Friday. We'll go through these horses real quick. We had talked about Poolside with Slim. Noah, real quick, Neon Beach is kind of the last one we need to talk about in this race, and I'll talk about Crown Imperial for a sec. This is another horse. This was a horse that Steve initially thought was for turf. Ran down at Saratoga in a sprint race on the turf. Didn't run that bad necessarily. Just might be better routing. Now coming back to the turf, you know, maybe she's not good enough to win this race, but definitely one to keep in mind, you think?
Yeah, another one where it looked like Steve was content to keep her on the dirt just with the way that she had been training and running.
Mm-hmm.
And she's very classy. You know, Steve threw her straight into stakes races after she broke the maiden. I'm just a little worried that she's maybe plateaued at this point in her career, but if she does take to the turf, I think one that can maybe step up and be a threat here.
Yeah, I mean, and she was on the Oaks Trail. I mean, she was Honeybee and Martha Washington. I mean, she was right in the mix there. Then, you know, running into these optional claimers and listed stakes. So she's been running very well. Just a matter of, will she take back to the turf? Being Giants Causeway, I'm sure she won't have any issue, but is going to have to be one to contest with kind of a little bit of a hotter pace, as a lot of us are going with horses coming from the back. I'm going 10-4-3. Pat's going 7-10-6. I'm getting way too ahead of myself. That's the horse that I wanted to talk about. The Crown Imperial. Ray Lou comes in to ride for John Ortiz here, or another horse coming out of that Appalachian race at Keeneland. Ran at Gulfstream. Here Comes the Bride. You know, did win at Kentucky Downs last time. Maybe just a little bit, you know, of a step above, too much step above here, but did run an 85 and Here Comes the Bride, losing to Pounce, who was on the lead that day, if you remember when we talked about her. Crown Imperial makes a lot of sense. I just don't, for me, this is one of those horses that I don't see a way of winning for her. She's going to sit mid-pack towards the back, just like the Pounce and Nicest Pie. And if I'm going to have one of those horses that's going to be flying from the back, I would much rather have the two I mentioned before than Crown Imperial. She's also benefited from, you know, she hasn't had like that. Here Comes the Bride race. She had a great trip on the rail, just didn't really have enough to get it done at all. The one race I will say at Kentucky Downs, she split horses in that race. It was a very impressive race, but 73 buyer and really, you know, that 85 buyer. But other than that, you know, every race has been 12 points or below that 85. So Crown Imperial is going to have to get a setup. But if I was looking other ways with, you know, the way she runs, I would be looking for other horses, as you see, whether I have the 10 and the 4. So again, I'm going 10-4-3. Pat's going 7-10-6. Charlie's going 10-3-6. Noah's going 10-4-6. Guys, switching over to the feature on the card at Penn National. This is the last of the turf racing as well before it gets too dark. As like I said at the top of the show, they run all these turf races before because they have lights for the dirt course, but they don't have lights for the turf course. So all these races, the 3 through 6, I believe it's 2 through 6 actually, but we're covering 3 through 6, are run on the turf. Christopher D'Souza also says, thanks for joining the show, Christopher. Greatly appreciate it. He says he likes number 4, Nice as Pie. I agree with you, Christopher, on that one. And again, for my connections, of course, with Kelsey and Crownsway, hopefully that would be a great result for her. Guys, this is the Penn Mile, obviously a mile on the turf for 3-year-olds, going for $400,000. So it's a very good race for a smaller track like Penn National. Draws a field of 10. with the morning line favorite being your American Turf winner at God knows what odds. The number 10, Tricari for Grand Motion. Umberto Rispoli comes back in to ride as after the winning ride on the American Turf. The number 4, First World War, is your second choice. Dettori hops aboard for Brendan Walsh. And your third choice is the number 2, Good Lord Laurie at 9-2, Pratt. And Peter Golias getting the training job from George Weaver here. As you'll see, two of us are going with the number 2, Good Lord Laurie. That's Patrick and Noah. And 2 of us are going with the number 4, First World War. Charlie, you and I have been chasing this horse for a long time. We caught him at good times, and we've caught him at not good times. So hopefully, obviously, this is a good time for First World War. And I'll bring up the pace scenario first, because that's the one thing that I want to mention. The pace looks like it should set up for a lot of these horses that are coming from the back, i.e. the 2. The 4 doesn't necessarily be that far back, but it should sit a really nice stalking trip in this race, as I'll show it now. You'll see the 3, Tropenhagen is going to go way out, 120 early time for him, as you see to the left here. And Good Lord Laurie is going to be right behind with a 108 speed figure. So, Charlie, with the number 4, First World War, looks to set a pretty good trip.
Yeah, this was obviously one that you and I made abundantly clear how much we loved him in that effort too back in the Kitten's Joy. We, really thought the pace would set up well. And, this is one who, it hasn't really mattered, the surface or conditions, has run really well. But then again, another one that just didn't seem to love the good turf. Also in the replay, I remember watching the horse got steadied at one point, ran against Neat, who's a decent horse, Cugino, who obviously came back to run a really nice effort. Same with Liganos, who ran back to another nice effort. So certainly has ran against a bunch of talented horses, has run against a bunch of ones, that have even tried to maybe go down that Derby trail earlier on. So for me, I just think this is the horse to beat in the race. I think another thing that kind of First World War benefits so much is his versatility kind of works out to his favor, where he kind of consistently can outperform maybe what others believe his ability is, because of the fact that he can always kind of, if it's a faster pace, he's happy to sit farther back. If it is a slower pace, he's happy to be within a length or 2. I just think he always finds a way, usually other than when he got studied last time out and didn't love the good turf, can work out a pretty good trip consistently. I know he's been with Tyler G forever, now gets to Tory, but I still trust Dettori. The horse is working forwardly as well. I think he's the horse to beat.
So much as we love Tyler G, I'm not too worried about getting Frankie Dettori aboard in a race
he's still
like
very
this.
Talented.
I like him closer to the pace. I think he does his better running close to the pace, albeit, like you said, he lost by 3. Charlie mentioned he got steadied pretty heavily on the inside, never really could get to do his best running. So I think he's versatile enough to where if he does fall a little bit farther back than what the time form pace showed, I don't think it's going to be that big of a problem. The only problem, I think, is going to be catching a horse like the number 2, Good Lord Laurie, who's going to get a little bit of a jump on a horse like First World War and a big jump on other horses that we'll talk about in a little bit. Noah, you have this horse on top. Charlie and I actually have the same picks, but so we both have this horse in second. Patrick also has this horse on top. And this horse has been working very well up in New York. Now ships over to here. I think this is a very good spot for this horse.
Yeah, another one where Pat and I are in lockstep. I really wish I could hear what he had to say. This was more of, I like the way that he won last time. I believe Peter, I'm not going to try and say that last name. I believe that trainer is George Weaver's assistant. So it's a George Weaver trained horse. If the last work is any indication of what this horse is capable of, in addition to the fact that this horse is 2 for 2 lifetime and it's, won impressively, especially last time in the Woodhaven. I think, you showed the pace. I think it set up for him. And you get Pratt aboard, which is, nothing to sneeze at as well.
Oh.
This was a little more of, I just wasn't in love with some of the other shorter prices. So this is kind of the one that I ultimately landed on.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I thought it was either 2 or the 4. I think there's a lot of other horses that we can touch on in a little bit, as this will obviously be the race we'll spend the most time on. This is a race where I think a lot of horses can run underneath. For me, it was between the 4 or the 2 on top. But obviously, Charlie agrees with me underneath in the 6. I thought the 7 was definitely another one that has to be considered. And obviously, the American Turf winner, Tricari, has to be thrown in there. But obviously, I'll have my doubts, as this is kind of the horse that I always say I need to see again. I mean, this horse has run well, previously ran an 81 at Gulfstream, the optional claimer, won the rush away at Turfway Park, getting a 77, now jumps to an 89. So, 8 points higher than what previously run. Obviously, it was a great run. Grand Motion had this horse trained and spotted really well. But this was by far the longest shot in the field at 47-1. Noah, you have this horse in third, so I'll let you keep talking. I just wasn't sure how to treat this race. Obviously, Legend of Time came back to run well at Belmont at the Big A that race. At Brumar came back to run okay. You and I looked at each other after this race at Churchill, and we were like, man, that race was pretty bad. Not the best race, American Turf we've seen, especially according to like 2023's American Turf. But either way, I think Tricari could sit another similar trip to what he got in the American Turf and could get another nice setup.
Yeah, I do remember, looking at you and be like, well, I never would have had that horse. But in a funny way, I think, after we said that and what we've seen from a couple of the other runners, I think it might come up a little bit better than maybe people gave him credit for, especially, what I gave him credit for. I thought Legend of Time in that race was very likely, and boy, was I wrong. But again, in terms of a value standpoint, you got 47-1 on Tricari last time versus you're getting 3-1, possibly lower. I think it'll probably be about 3-1, with the outside post. I think there's a couple other, threats in here, the 2 and the 4, like we've mentioned. I'll go into the 7, who you guys don't have. And I know Charlie's, not a big fan of this horse. But I'm going to give Set one more chance. Going into that American Turf, he was running well, never really did anything wrong, might have benefited from a couple cold paces. But with the break that he had last time in that race at Churchill, he just, never had a chance after that. I'm going to, try him again. If he's not right this time, maybe some divorce papers, but at 6-1, I think certainly one you have to look at in a very wide open race.
I mean, Charlie, I'll kind of let you go into it. I mean, obviously being Mr. South Beach, you're looking at this horse that's gotten pretty easy trips in the earliest 2. Granted, the last race was, like Noah said, was done after the break, but maybe he would have run well, maybe better, maybe he wouldn't have. Obviously there's nothing that can tell, but coming back into this spot, I just think with the pace pressure that he'd have to go through if he's going to go to the lead in this race, I think was enough for me to kind of look elsewhere.
Yeah, like I said, I feel as my home away from home track, I kind of know which horses I trust and don't. And I was, preaching to the choir, shouting and screaming at anybody who would listen that Set was the definition of a fraud and would prove me right. Now, granted, again, I think the break didn't, do him any favors and kind of made my job a little easier. But I know my Gulfstream horses. I've seen who he ran against. He didn't run against anyone. He didn't visually impress me. He got dream scenarios with pace. And then as soon as he had to face real competition, again, I think the break made it look worse than it would have, but I don't think he was winning that race anyway. I was begging for him to take money, and I was happy because it was making some of my other horses in that race give me some extra value. Little did that matter because I didn't have the 10 in this race, and I never would have. And I'll also briefly address the 10 because I know no one pat up that horse there. I absolutely think he could run back to a decent performance. My problem is I agree with you, Kyle. I think this race is between the 2 and the 4. And when I looked, I know it's not showing for you there, but the morning lines are out now, and he's the 3-1 favorite. And I'm just not going to put a 3-1 favorite in third. That just doesn't really make any sense to me at all. Like at that point, you're more so looking for a price that can maybe get up. And I completely agree with what you said. I think we need to see one more. I'll talk about our 6 real quick. And I'm sure I'm going to have to address the 8 Freedom Principle because the 6 ran against the 8, and that's who you and I both have. For me, this was strictly a replay angle. I thought the 8 got a really nice trip. Still was a great performance, but I've seen this one run against others like First World War, Brumar, Gino, and I wasn't impressed. I just think Miguel Vasquez executed a perfect trip for this one last time out, and it worked out nice. But I think Please Advise has a ton of potential to step forward. This is one that they tried, sprinting for a while, and then, ran, obviously the figure isn't great, but ran a decent effort at Keeneland 3 back. Then they went back to more of the sprint at Aqueduct and ran a very nice effort in the win. And then after that, was lugging in, kind of got steady down the stretch, had nowhere to go, and never really got asked by Joe Bravo, because based off of the way he rode, he never really gave the horse the chance to get in clean air. Picks up Javier Castellano, which is a massive jockey upgrade from Joe Bravo, is working forwardly, and is one that I think is, very versatile and could certainly, be close enough on the pace that could close up for, second or third maybe.
Damn, the Jersey Joe disrespect in the freaking chat, man. That's brutal. Either way, I think I like this horse going a mile. I think 6 furlongs is probably what he likes to do the most. But 6.5 at Woodbine and 6.5 at Kentucky Downs play longer with track configuration rather than just a straight 6 furlong sprint at a normal configuration. The mile at Gulfstream last time kind of put that to bed. I think this horse can run a mile perfectly fine. Obviously, Peter Golias again gets the training job from George Weaver, being close to him. Gets these coming over from Penn National will run in his name. The numbers certainly fit in this race. So number 6, Please Advise, but is definitely going to have to get some sort of pace set up to be able to run into. Albeit it does look likely in this race. Last thing we'll put on the screen, and then we'll move on to the next race. Jason Batts brings up a great point from Ed DeRosa. Says since 2017, Post 10 is 1 for 29 in 1 mile turf races at Penn National. None of 29 were favorites, but the chalk from the 9 post has been 0 for 7 since 2015, not 2017, as he clarified right there. So you definitely don't want to be outside as Penn National. No, I think that's what you kind of touched on earlier with it being a smaller turf course, that you have less run up to the first turn. If you're going to get caught wide, you definitely don't want to get caught wide in those smaller, tighter turned turf tracks. It's as the boss man just said in the chat, no bueno. So I completely agree, Jason. That's a great stat. Thanks so much for putting that in the chat. Greatly appreciated. I'm going 4-2-6. Pat's going 2-10-7. Charlie's going 4-2-6, and Noah's going 2-7-10. It's basically co-host versus co-host there, because two of us both have the same top 3 horses, and we'll see how it comes through in the end. Guys, let's move on to race number 7 here. Good luck however you guys play in the Penn Mile. It's a fantastic race with a lot of winners, possible winners, and especially earlier in the card. As we're now moving to the dirt track, as we're getting to 8:15 out on the East Coast as these races will go off. So we're moving on to the under the lights on the dirt track as I switch over the Equibase right now. You see race number 7 is the Fabulous Strike Stakes. 6 furlongs, 3 old and up. These are for not Pennsylvania breds, excuse me. But this is for $50K, again, going 6 furlongs as I switch over the picks right now. You'll see Noah and I are lockstep in this race. Charlie going, we're pretty similar as well. We have the same top 2, but going a little bit different on top with the winner, the number 7, Get Set for Jairo Rodriguez and Jamie Ness, running an insane number last time out for this horse. So that will be your morning line favorite. The second choice will be the number 9, Downtown Charlie Brown for Tyler Connor, coming over and back to, I believe, his main track, I believe as someone said in the chat earlier. And the number 8, Meet Me at Mundy's for Bruce Kravitz, of course, the all-time winning trainer at Penn National, being the third choice at 5-1. Charlie, I'll let you talk first again, Noah, and then I'll let you go into our top pick, the 9. The number 7, Get Set. Jairo Rodriguez comes over from probably Pimlico that day to ride in the night for Jamie Ness, and that last race was really a really nice race, but a number that just came out of absolute nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know watching it if I would say it was necessarily a 97, but it was still an incredibly impressive performance that caught my eye for sure.
Charlie, real quick, sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I mean, you could see this horse ran an optional claiming last time in a 124, or they finished in 124-3. He finished that last race in 122-2. So, I mean, that's over 2 seconds faster than what they finished last time out. So just to put the number in perspective, just in a timing way, that's over 2 seconds. That's a very big jump in racing.
Yeah, that's like 8 lengths, give or take, depending on how you measure it. But yeah, that's certainly still an impressive step forward where I saw a difference. And to do that at 7 years old is also pretty impressive. You don't really see many 7-year-olds make that big of an improvement. But for me, I mean, I saw the jockey trainer numbers, which I thought were very impressive. The other thing I kind of just keyed in on here is, they got Get Set back to that more of like a I know 7 furlongs isn't a sprint, but nonetheless, you see obviously this horse is running really well at 6 and 6.5 for a while. Then they tried a mile and a 16th and a mile and 70 yards, and it wasn't bad efforts. The figures were okay, but it just seemed like it was a little too long. And then they went back to 7. Now going back down to 6 here. So I think this one could sit, a really nice stalking trip. I like that they're going back to, the sprinting distance. The horse is working very forwardly. Again, you look at the jockey trainer numbers, Kyle, if you could, kind of zoom in or key in on those for those listening, are obviously very impressive as well. So that was the main things I sort of keyed in on. I just thought, again, with that freak effort and those numbers and this distance, I just think a lot really fits for this horse, as well as, this is one that's, familiar with running against these kinds of horses in this area. And then I'll touch on the 9 briefly and let you and, Noah talk a little bit more about it, just because obviously I have the 8 and 3rd, but the 7 and the 9 were the 2 stuck out to me the most. Maybe Noah will take the angle and saying that this is why he put the 9 on top, is that it's a horse that kind of has my name in it. And whenever there's a horse we see that has Charlie involved in the name at all, that horse ends up usually winning. So if that's the angle you want with Noah, I understand. But look, this horse obviously just worked a 46 and 3, so it was working incredibly forwardly, has great numbers, is extremely fast. And, you could argue the best efforts have been at 6 furlongs at this track. So, has plenty of familiarity here. I mean, 8 wins, 4 seconds, and 3/3 and 19 starts at Penn. That's pretty incredible. This is where this horse, wants to be. So for me, these are the 2 personally. I don't know what you guys thought, but I thought the 9 and 7 were the 2 who very clearly stuck out above the rest.
Well, there's one other horse that I agree with and we all kind of agree with. Pat has that horse on top being the number 6. No, going into downtown Charlie Brown, I'm going to show the time form real quick here. As time form, I believe, didn't think, favors front runner. So not a whole lot of pace for a horse like the 7 to close into, which was my little bit concern. Albeit I didn't really like the horses that were towards the lead, the number 4 and the number 2, number 2 Point Pele and number 4 Memory Bouquet. I think the number 9 Downtown Charlie Brown, minus that one freak effort out of nowhere from the 7, those 80s that this horse has run 3 back and last out, definitely fit a lot in this race.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because I didn't see a ton of speed in here. And I thought Tyler Connor might do what he tried to do last time at Keeneland, where he just got out to the front and tried to do his best running from there. You look at the last 2 races, much better fields than what he had been previously facing. He goes back to Penn National, which he had run, almost all of his starts at, or close to 2/3 at least. Gets back to a much easier spot. 2 back in the Tomfoolery, I believe that's the name, which is an awesome name, by the way. At Super Chow, I think came back and won. Was that on Black Eyed Susan Day or was that on Preakness Day?
It was on, I believe it was Preakness Day, if I'm remembering correctly. Was it not May 18th? Yeah, Saturday, Preakness Day.
Yeah, so it looks like the field there is holding up. And then at Keeneland tried to go 7, cuts back to 6. And now, as we've seen, the time form with speed that I think sets up for him. I think, like I said, Tyler Connor might be aggressive and try to just take the lead and try to take him all the way. Is that what you kind of thought?
I wouldn't be shocked if that happened by any means. I just think Downtown Charlie Brown does his best running with a target. As you can see back in these races, just sitting off by a length and a half, sitting off by 2, by 2.5, by 2. I think he might just do his best running with a target. But either way, whether he goes to lead or not, he's either going to be right on the pace or just off of it. And I think no matter which way you put it, I think the pace scenario really sets up for the number 9 Downtown Charlie Brown to be able to either take him all the way or get the jump on a lot of other horses and at the top of the stretch and win pretty handily as long as he gets the trip. The only other horse I will talk about here, and then I'll touch on the 8 actually as well, is the number 6 Two Ducks Opportunity, Alicia Perez for Adrian Wolfson, who actually comes back, has been running at Penn National, but does his bidding in New York and other places and Maryland as well. This is a horse that fits that same type of trip profile as Downtown Charlie Brown. Is we all have this horse everywhere. So no, I'll let you kind of touch on Two Ducks Opportunity, then I'll move into then we'll move into the 8 and then we'll move on. But and what'd you like most about this horse to throw him in 3rd?
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting horse. I think just the fact that this horse is lightly raced, showing some improvement. off of the long layoff might be a little bit of concern.
Yeah.
But this trainer, Elijah Perez, who I'm not familiar with, I mean, look at his stats. I mean, he's just been going off. He's been on a tear for the whole year.
There you go. 0 for 8 over 180 plus day layoffs. So even being with 14 for 34 this meet, the layoff numbers could definitely, throw a wrinkle if you like this horse to win like Patrick does.
Yeah, I think you could take that into consideration. But also on the other hand, you've got some of these horses like the 7, like the 8, some of these others that have been kind of racing for a while. So you kind of know what they are. While this one, still has the opportunity to improve. First start as a 4-year-old. And these, the trainer is very capable, maybe not necessarily off the layoff, but you're getting 10-1. So definitely one to consider, underneath, and one that Patrick's considering on top.
Yeah, I mean, look, this horse, like I said, sits a really nice trip profile. Just a matter of the layoff is what Tudyk's Opportunity is going to have to overcome, owned by Tudyk's Farm as well. So that's, I don't know if they're kind of like Donegal where they name all their horses after themselves. And yes, I think he misspoke, Lynn, but yeah, it is Alicia Perez. She's a very good trainer out there at Penn National. A really good female trainer out at Penn National. So definitely has a chance. Again, just gonna have to overcome the layoff. Last horse I'll mention real quick. This is number 8, Meet Me at Mondays, Bruce Kravitz. This is a horse that has run very well, but has run into hot paces in the last couple few. And I think that has what's been entailing this very good run that this horse has been on. Although last year at Delaware, this horse ran a very good race into a cold pace and was much closer up than what he's shown recently. It's just a matter of, can this horse sit a good trip to be able to come into the top 3? And I think top 3 could be very likely for this horse. It's just a matter of, I don't think there's enough pace for this horse to be able to on the win end. But to round out your exactas and trifectas, I think Meet Me at Mondays makes a lot of sense, especially numbers-wise with this 89 last time. Just the matter of, is there enough pace for this host to close in well enough? I'm going 9-6-7. Pat's going 6-8-7. Charlie's going 7-9-8, and Noah's going 9-7-6. Guys, moving on to the last race of this sequence that we're going to cover of the stakes races on Penn Mile Day on Friday. Again, if you're enjoying the content, or again, you find yourself coming back on the regular and you aren't subscribed, why not? You're already coming back anyway. Please go down below the video player. Please smash the like button. It helps us out a lot, and it's the best way to support our channel. Not only will it show us that you guys are liking the content, but it'll push this video out into the YouTube algorithm to hopefully bring horse players like yourself over to the HHH Racing Podcast. And again, only 46% of you guys that come back to the show every single week are not subscribed. So if you're not subscribed, why not? Please go down below the video player and hit subscribe. We would greatly appreciate it. Race number 8, guys, is the Pennsylvania Ladies Dash. As I move, it's for 50,000, 6 furlongs, fillies and mares, as basically just the same race as the one we just covered for the ladies, as it's a field of 7 with the strongest morning line favorite we've seen all day in the number 6, New Hire. Tyler Connor for Aaron McClellan. Second choice is Fee for Jaime Torres for Jorge Cruz, and number 3 could be a Cougar at Salvaggio at 7-2. As I brought up the picks already, you'll see three of us, are going with the number 3. Could be a Cougar, and I think that's all down to one factor. Noah, you are going the other way with the morning line favorite, New Hire. So I'll let you talk first about why we're all going to be wrong and you're going to be right with the number 6, New Hire. And I'll bring up the pace scenario. Actually, I'll bring up the pace scenario with the 3. So what'd you like most about the number 6, New Hire?
Yeah, even though I went with the kind of the ABC, the top 3 choices in this race, I didn't necessarily think it was easy by any means. This is just one where, has run some decent races of late. It seems like she's kind of, still kind of progressing, which you don't always see with 5-year-olds. But, off that over a year layoff and coming back to form back in December, even though she hasn't necessarily won or ran, super well in the last couple of races, it's been against some pretty tough company. She gets back to the Penn circuit. Last time she was here, it was at this distance, and she came from 5 off and won really nicely. I think if she repeats that effort, she's going to be pretty tough, and one that, she's 5 for 9 here at Penn National. So one to trust if you're not, sold with a couple of the others. One thing I will say is the 3. I did like the 3 quite a bit. And maybe I'm just looking too far into it. But I actually kind of was inclined to downgrade the 3 a little bit, just because the jockey Hernandez actually ends up on the 5 instead of the 3, and the Salgado hops on the 3. Maybe I'm looking too far into it, but did either you or Charlie kind of consider that when handicapping this race?
Charlie, I'll let you talk about that if you took that into account yet. If not, I'll talk about it.
Personally, I didn't, just because, I mean, obviously I know like the numbers aren't that much. It's a small sample size, but the jockey trainer combo still is, hitting at a decent clip. And for me, honestly, and I mean, look, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but with these more like local jockeys who I don't know as well, it's not as much of a red flag. It'd be more of a concern, obviously if this was a bigger race in the card and maybe, we were looking at some of the more renowned names that are coming down here and be like, oh, wow, like none of the big names here have chosen to hop on this one. But for me, ultimately, I mean, look, the big concern with the 3, obviously, is there's these random dud performances. And when the 3 is off, my God, is she off? I mean, you can see as that 12 figure losing by 26, had that 29 figure losing by 15, and then last time popped to 0 with, losing by 48. So obviously, there can be those really bad efforts, but then you see obviously the 72, 76, and 73, which all would certainly fit and, be figures that in a field like this are tough to beat. So I'm just kind of hoping that, again, I'm willing to draw a line through that last race. And, I think that level was just too tough for her. Obviously, she was 14-1 after being 5-1 or less in pretty much every other start of her career. So I'm just kind of hoping that now that she's back at a reasonable level, she's loved it at Penn, has 4 wins in a second and 9 starts, and is pretty damn fast in a race where I don't really know if anybody's going to be able to catch her.
Well, and that's the one thing I want to point out, Charlie. Bring up the time form here. See, the 3 is basically all alone on this lead. I think the inconsistencies is definitely one thing. And no, I did take that into account. And I wasn't too happy about it because with Hernandez's stats being obviously a 21% rider at Penn National, it's definitely raising some eyebrows as to why, especially since they're by the same trainer. They're both Salvaggios. And this one ends up going with the 5 instead of the 3, which I thought was a really interesting move. The classic 0 buyer angle. I just thought if this horse is going to be by herself on the lead, she should have no excuses. She does her best running on by herself on the lead. When she takes sustained pressure, it's when these really bad inconsistencies hop in. As you see, is when she's either headed or running at a really hot pace. The 3 that are bad is the 0 here, where she went 22-3 the whole way, dropped off completely to horses like Morning Matcha, who are very, very, very good Pennsylvania breds. Then in this open allowance race, took pressure the whole way, went 45-1 to the half mile, fell back to last, and she was headed going 44-4 at Penn National and dropped back 13. And same thing here, went 44-3 at Penn, dropped back by 26. So I assume if she has the lead by herself and control the tempo, I'm assuming that she'll be good enough to be able to beat this field with these 73s and the 76s that she's been running. But it is definitely a concern for me when the jockeys switch off like that. The number 2, Fee, I'll talk about real quick, and then I'll let the boys touch on anything they want to touch on about their horses underneath. Fee is a horse coming over for Jesus Cruz. Last ridden at Charlestown, losing by 14 at 6.5, but coming back to Penn where she won last time out, beating number 5 Moon Safe. Makes a ton of sense from a pace scenario standpoint. Will be close enough to the pace, not on the pace with the 3, but tracking just off. Has won under Jesus Cruz before. That first race at Penn National is the only race that Jesus Cruz has won at Penn National. So Fee is definitely one to be considered just from a straight trip standpoint. It has back numbers to match as well. Charlie, you have the 6 underneath in second. Actually, Noah has the 6 on top, new hire. Anything you want to touch on there? And then anything with the 2 is we all have the same top 3. Then we'll move on to our best bets.
Yeah, no, I think Noah kind of covered the 6 pretty well. I mean, again, is the only other one with, multiple figures in that, 70s range. And I will say, the argument could certainly be for this one, there is a lot more consistency. I mean, every damn effort is pretty much high 60s to mid 70s, so at least you don't really have to worry about those duds. My big concern with this one, as you can see, the main struggles that she's dealt with is when it's a cold pace, so kind of the opposite of our three that we have on top. Is this is one that's going to want to come from off the pace, and I just have a feeling that's going to be another issue. I think this one absolutely is the other one that has a real chance at winning and could certainly get up for second. I just think the three might get that dream setup with no other pace. The two is another one who had that dud last time out, but I'm willing to draw a line through. Really liked it here too back at this course and distance and had a nice effort. I just think this is another one that's more speed based and doesn't have the same speed as the three. So I just don't really know her method of victory. I also will touch on the four, and I'll let you touch on the one briefly, Kyle, just because I know those are Pat's other ones and you're going to want to talk about them. The four I think is a little interesting in that, she's the youngest in the race, has only had three starts, had that awful zero buyer. And I think it's certainly an interesting one. It was 55-1 on debut, then 66-1, and then one going away at 41-1 at this track and distance. And, the time, honestly, in this field, even though the figure is bad, the time isn't that awful. So, I mean, maybe that was Pat's angle. This one, would need a big improvement, but I guess has the most reason to have a chance to improve with being so lightly raced and young. Yep. But I just think this is a big ask. And then, if you wanted to cover Pat's one real quick, because I know that's the other one he has.
Yeah, I mean, the four has improvement chance. It's just a matter those figures are just so slow. Going to have to be a big improvement there from the four to be able to be anywhere in contention, at least in theory, in this race. Of course, he can improve. Number one for Flint Stites is definitely one that's going to sit a similar trip to like horses like the two. I just don't know if this horse is good. I mean, the top buyer is 82, but that was all the way back late last year. This horse has sustained long campaign, really is definitely not in the best form at this rate. Going to have to show back to those 82 numbers to be able to be considered for me. Yeah, okay, Charlie. I'll take a pass on that one.
Kyle, I think we should mention the five because Steven Vanderbroek makes a good point. And it kind of goes back to the jockey gymnastics. I mean, if you kind of buy into that, I think you have to at least upgrade this one a little bit, in some regard, and definitely a horse to use underneath. I mean, she's finished in the money in half of her races. She might be a little slow, but somebody that can definitely clunk up in a race like this.
I mean, that's exactly what you said. What I was going to mention. This horse just looked slow on paper. Never really had a number that's been able to be competitive with this field. But yeah, I mean, if you're taking jockeys, I mean, she's 11-for-6 at Penn National and gets Hernandez aboard versus the 3 at 7-2 versus 10-1. Steven Vanderbroek says, keep an eye on the 5 here, coming back to Penn where he won at this distance, but this field's a tad harder, but a nice price for one of the leading riders at Penn National at 10-1. Going to have to work out a trip, but maybe something like these, just sitting just off the speed would work in this race for them to find Moon safe, but it's definitely going to have to, I think, improve. And I'm just not sure with her being 6 that there's enough room for improvement, but definitely one to keep in mind for sure. Steven, thanks so much, man, for joining the show. Again, greatly appreciate it. I'm going 3-2-6. Pat's going 3-1-4. Charlie's going 3-6-2, and Noah's going 6-2-3. Guys, moving over to best bets here, and I'll go over Pat's first. So Pat likes the number 7 Crown Imperial in race 5 in the Penn Oaks underneath key and a small win bet just in case that horse comes on top at a nice price. And race number 6, a double, singling the 2 in the Penn Mile, which is Good Lord Lori for Pratt with Pratt aboard, and into the 6 and 8 in race number 7, which is, of course, Tudyk's Opportunity and Meet Me at Mondays. So Pat giving out those 2 best bets. Good luck to him. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today to talk about his opinions. Charlie, you are up next. Going race 4, a double, 111 into the 10, and that is in the With Anticipation. The 1, a Western Yarn for Anna Delacour off the layoff that we talked about, and the 11, John Dutton for Flavian Pratt and Chris Davis, and into Pounce, who's the single 10 in race number 5, and in race 6, an exacta 4/2-6, keying First World War on top.
Yeah, so, I mean, we talked a lot about your guys. One, obviously, in that race, the trainer's great numbers off the layoff, and certainly I would guess is the horse to be, and likely will go off as your favorite. And I just thought the 11 made a ton of sense. I mean, obviously, the big question is people in our chat have brought up repeatedly is the struggles from the outside post. The one good news is that's going to be one of the most forwardly placed horses in the race and one that doesn't have a crazy pace. So I think the 11, especially with Paderborn, I think he'll know he needs to kind of send pretty hard at the beginning, and then maybe he can slow him down a little bit and get over. So, that one also won't go off at double digits, and it'll take some money for sure, but would be a nice one hit. And then, as no one I touched on, Pounce seems like the most likely winner in the card, so I singled that one in my double. And then for my exacta, look, I love First World War. I'll keep saying it. I'm not gonna. I'm willing to die on that. I'm only going on my shield on that horse over and over. So I'm going to put him on top. And then we talked a lot about Kyle, how we think it's kind of between the 4 and the 2. But look, the 2's only had 2 starts. So for whatever reason, he doesn't do his running, or maybe just this third effort against probably the best field he's faced yet is just a little too much to ask. And you and I talked a lot about how the 6 is one that has a ton of room for improvement as well, kind of similar to that 2. And has run some very decent efforts and proved that the mile isn't a problem. So put the 4 over the 2 and 6, who I think are the most likely horses to finish, in the money outside of First World War.
I love it, Charlie. Obviously, we agreed completely in that race, so I don't disagree with those bets at all. Good luck with your best bets. No, obviously, you're next. You're going 2 ice cold doubles, my friend, and this is what I like. I have transformed them, ladies and gentlemen. I have transformed them into best betters. Race 4, singling the 1 in that race, which is a Western Yarn for Anna Delacour, and Pounce in race 5. And it's not race 10. What race is that? No,
Coast fail.
I know. Which one is that? I missed
that. That's 6 and 7.
6 and 7. Sorry. So race 6, double 2, starting with Good Lord Laurie and the Penn Mile, and singling the number 9, who Noah and I both like, Downtown Charlie Brown.
Yeah, so first one starting in race 4 is very similar to Charlie's, just going 1 into 10. First one is the one for Delacour, and then into Pounce, so don't need to talk too much about that. Then another one starting in race 6, starting with Good Lord Laurie, who's technically for the Weaver Barn, 2 for 2. Pratt hops aboard, I think is going to be very logical in a spot like that. And then going into the horse that both Kyle and I like, Downtown Charlie Brown, who I think can take advantage of that slow pace, especially on time form. Unfortunately, they don't have a pick 4 for these 4 races.
That's
4,
what
5,
I was
6,
going to
7.
say. Yeah.
Otherwise, I would make that a bet. But I think it is important to mention that they do have a couple of interesting bets. One I will mention, they actually have a mandatory pick 5 starting in race 6, which is the Penn Mile. So for those of you listening and betting, you can take some opinions of ours and add a couple of yourselves in the later races there. And then there also is, they have an all-turf pick 4, and it's actually 4 races in a row, which are 3, 4, 5, and 6, I believe.
Yep, that's correct.
Which is because they run the turf races earlier in the card because of the lights. So if you're definitely playing the card, I think you should definitely look at both of those sequences.
Like I said, they're offering some very, very good bets at Penn National. So like I said, for putting the card together that they did and the betting options, it's definitely a fantastic wagering on a Friday as well. So, you're not having to wait till Saturday to play a good card. This is definitely one. Noah, good luck with your best bets. I'm going 2 pretty easy ones here, guys. We talked about Pounce enough. Don't have to talk about it. If she's ready, she should definitely be she's definitely the most likely winner in that race as long as she can come back to form. I would back up in that race. I'm probably going to back up with smaller doubles with Nicest Pie. I think if she gets the pace set up, I think she could be very dangerous, and that being the number 4 in race 5. And then we talked about Good Lord Laurie and First World War. Don't need to talk much about that. I just think they're the 2 most likely winners in that race, and you can get good value in that double from race 5 into race 6. And we talked about it. Race number 8, guys, number 3 could be a Cougar. I just think she gets a fantastic setup, and albeit she is a little inconsistent, but if she has the lead by herself, it's when she does her best running, and I could see her absolutely getting away with Murder on the front end for all 6 furlongs and being able to win by, maybe a diminishing like 1.5 or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised by any means, and especially being the 3rd morning line favorite at 7-2 is good enough value for me. I think anything below like 3-1, I wouldn't be willing to take a risk on an inconsistent horse like that. At least in that field, 3-1's fair. I think anything below that I wouldn't, and above obviously make you question a little bit, not taking any money, but anything above 3-1 for me on could be a Cougar. But guys, thank you guys all so much. And Jim Pilar's, I'll honest one thing. I'll highlight the one thing here. He said, been a while since I've seen the show live and can't express how impressed I am with the information, reasoning, and analysis provided. Fantastic job, man. Jim, as one of our longest supporters, like I said, I can't thank you enough for being in the chat always and just all the kind words you give us throughout our entire journey here that ultimately started out as an experiment. So Jim and everyone else that's issued a ton of kind words for us. Again, we cannot be more appreciative than you guys sticking with us throughout the entirety of Bettin N Boozin lives and hopefully for years to come. For my co-hosts, Noah Maher and Charlie Freeman, this has been your host, Kyle Roscoe, in episode 82 of Bettin N Boozin here on the HHH Racing Podcast, covering Penn National, Penn Mile Day, the all stakes preview for Friday, May 31st. And until next time, everyone, crush your bets, win those photos, and stay safe, everyone. We'll see you in the next one. Have a great night.